What's going on, guys? Welcome to another Pianote Live lesson. Andrew and Jordan here.
Hey.
And what are we doing? Hand
independent stuff. Hand independence. How to make it a bit more musical.
Yeah, because it's a little boring.
It can be. Yeah, it's totally. It's a chore, but it's also one of the most important chores in the rule book of piano lessons. So
of course,
it's one of those things. We all got to do it. We all got to get these guys nice and separate, and learn some techniques to do that. So. This lesson is kind of a specific conceptual one. This is something that I like to do myself to practice hand independence, while also giving myself some fuel to inspire some, songwriting or come up with some cool ways to just mess with chords.
Right.
Yeah, mess with chords in an educational context.
Yeah.
So before we get started, we'll just do the quick little housekeeping here. We've got the Ask a Question button below the video, so if you have any questions, just send them in. And we've got a couple of sheet music examples. So we got the PDF, and we also have a couple just images that you can see below the screen for the two examples that I'm going to be working with directly from the sheet music. Cool. So for the purposes of this lesson, there's kind of two types of hand independence that we're going to look at. We're going to look at hand independence that sort of mirrors each other, which is going to be the first exercise that we look at. And then we're going to look at one that's kind of like what I just demoed at the beginning of the lesson here, which is using one hand to be the driving rhythmic force behind your music, and the other hand to be, to develop that separation enough so it's more of the melodic force behind it. Right. Yeah. So the first thing that we're going to look at is that first example. So this is I came up with this week. It's basically just a chord inversion little tune that I made up of a 1 chord, a 4 chord, and a 5 chord. So really simple chords that we're working with. We're also working in the key of C, but as with anything on the piano, once you've mastered things in a certain key, you should try it out in another key, because that's going to help build your familiarity with the whole piano. So basically, the general gist of this first exercise is as follows here. You all know your chord inversions, so here's our C chord here. So C in root position, C in first inversion, C in second inversion, and then back up to the octave. So that's sort of what the left hand's going to be doing. And then the right hand is basically the same deal, but when we combine these together into the exercise, we're basically going to be taking advantage of the fact that our hands are mirrors of each other. So our pinkies are always to the outside of us, and our thumbs are always, pointed in, right? Unless you guys got weird different hands at home or something. But likely your hands are like ours. So I'm just going to demonstrate the first. I'll demonstrate the first repetition of the first 4 bars here. So it goes like this. Oops, pardon me. So, kind of a pretty little majory sounding thing, but really all I'm doing, I'm just going to look at the left hand here. I'm just playing open fifths in the left hand. So all I'm doing is going pinky finger, thumb, and then I'm just walking up. So remember, when you are playing piano and you're using your left hand, or both hands for that matter, the first and fifth intervals, they kind of complement each other in a really nice way, but they don't add a lot of color. Like even if you just listen to this progression here. Like, there's nothing really jarring about it or anything, but there's also there's no color there. You just kind of like hear this open, it's like, oh, what's this? What does this mean? Yeah. That's what the left hand's going to be doing. It's kind of this big open framework. And the right hand is where the color comes in. So once again, I'm going to demonstrate both hands here. So this is a really simple little technique here. All I did was, again, think of your left hand as playing this pattern based on the chords in root position. So we had our C chord, and then we just sort of bumped up to D, and then E, and then F, and then back down. The right hand is doing same chords, but now we're moving up one inversion. So it's still the same principle. We're still only playing our pinky and our thumb, but now we're going, like our thumb is on E. So, and for those who have keen ears, now you can sort of hear a bit of color, and that's because the E is the third of your C major triad.
Right.
And then when we move up, F is the third of the D minor, and then as opposed to just kind of too open, right? So this is just a really easy way to sort of see your hands as working together, but also doing something slightly different. It's kind of we call it contrary motion, which all that means is one hand's going up and the other hand's going down. For those who have checked out level 5 of the foundation videos, you'll see that we have some scales that use contrary motion, which is, for a piano player, that's a really common technique to practice hand independence. So, just in C major here. So we do that one octave together, just both moving up, and then we split. So my right hand is going to go up, and my left hand is going to go back down. And now they're going to join back together again, and then back down. Yeah, sorry, that's kind of a side track there. Let's just demonstrate the first 4 bars, just nice and slow with that 60 BPM click for everyone at home if they want to follow along. And then I'll demonstrate what the rest of the exercise is doing.
Sweet.
1, 2, 3, here we go. I'll do it one more time. Okay.
Messed with you there.
Yeah, they dropped the 1. Yeah. That's our nice save though. I was totally back on time. Yeah. So there we go. That's the exercise for the first 4 bars. The second time around, or the second line, I should say, is a little bit different. It actually requires some more accuracy, and that's another thing that's really important to build whenever you're working with hand independence is hand accuracy. So. Again, we're still working in this triad framework, but now, as you might know about triads with inversions, I kind of demonstrated a little bit just earlier in this lesson. So now we're going to be sort of working with, it's almost like an expansion on just a broken triad exercise. So again, we're still in this same, we're still using the same technique of this kind of like leapfrogging pinky thumb motion, and we're still basing our main chord movements off of just this triad on the 1 chord. So, pardon me, the left hand is just still in root position, and the right hand is going to be in the first inversion. But now we're going to sort of jump up. So this is where things get a little bit tricky. So we're going to our first 2 notes are the same as the beginning of the exercise, so this kind of leap. But then instead of just moving right to the next chord that's right adjacent to our C chord, we're going to jump up 1 inversion. So each set of our hands are going to jump up 1 C position. So we go, and then we move up. So in 1 fluid motion, it's like this. And that can be, that's important to take that really slow because Anything that sort of has a spatial jump, that's where you can sort of start making mistakes, or you hit a flub note or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that's it's easy to grasp intellectually, but it's maybe sometimes tough to actually practically play it, because it's not just a mind thing, it's also just a muscle memory thing, which is kind of the golden rule of hand independence. Is like, you get it in your head, but you got to also get it in your hands.
And a lot of that really just comes from repetition.
It comes from repetition, yeah. And anything that I'm teaching in this lesson here, this is kind of like if you're really just tired of doing this contrary motion scale stuff, and you sort of want to spice things up a little bit, working within this kind of framework that I'm talking about here is an asset, but definitely don't let that neglect your standard scale practice, because it's hand independence is a hard one battle, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so that was our C progression there. Next time, we're going to go down, and rather than resetting on C, we're actually going to go to the 4 chord. So we're going to go to F. And F, it's shaped the same way in the purposes of this exercise. So again, we're going to go down to the root note, or the root triad in our left hand, and our right hand is going to be just one inversion above. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to go at 60 BPM, and I'm just going to play that ascension, and then we're going to go down and just land on F, and then I'll go from there.
Cool.
Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, here we go. Do it one more time. Okay. So yeah, so it's this jump here. Requires you got to totally like reset your hands. So that's why practicing at 60 BPM is like the way to go.
Yeah.
Because anything where to me, there's 2 types of hand jumps. There's hand jumps that allow you to kind of keep a finger on the piano at all times, and then there's ones where you got to full on like remove your hand from the piano, reposition, and then plunk it down.
Right.
And that's a tough move to make, especially when you have both hands together.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend you do is just practice it one hand at a time before you combine these together. So now that you kind of get the gist of it, I'm going to play both progressions, because once we land back on that F, we're going to just take that same concept and move it up the keyboard. So it's going to sound like this. So C, then F, and then repeat. So we're back down here, and then back to F. And then we get to our final chord, which is G. So, and it's the same principle. So again, our G root position, and then our G first inversion. And then one more time. Right? Mm-hmm. Sounds like the ice cream man's coming.
We were saying that before. It does.
Yeah, it's got an ice cream man kind of vibe to it for sure.
Yeah.
So I'll play the whole thing at 60 BPM from top to bottom, and then I'll demo it at a faster tempo, and yeah, then we'll check out the next exercise.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you want to bump it up to 120 and then?
120?
Yeah. Let's try it.
Right.
Let's try it at 120.
I'll be impressed.
Yeah, me too. Okay, here we go. Oh, yeah. There you go.
Ooh,
Ice cream truck
very
speeding
nice.
along there. Just chucking them out of the truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, like that's tough. That was tough actually to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's sort of one way that I sort of see hand independence from a creative aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I tried my best to make this into something sort of like a little tune because I think, to me, practicing just in one scale or key is what starts to get things kind of boring.
Yeah.
If you can combine your practice by taking, you say you're practicing in C and then also like take that same exercise and sort of flow into F or flow into G as I sort of did there, that's what kind of gives, then you have a chord progression, right?
Yeah.
And that's what gives it a bit of a song-like quality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move on, but if you have any questions about that, absolutely send it in. Because the next thing that I want to take a look at is actually, I took this from level 10 of the Foundations series that we have on the site there. And this is sort of a philosophy that I employ a lot for improvisation or songwriting. And I call it like the motorboat or something. It's like this motorboat sensation in the left hand. Mm-hmm. So basically what it is I take a 4-note chord. So in this case, I'm here in C minor now, but you can take any 4-note chord that you like, or even just a 4-note phrase. And I basically make it into a broken 16th note ascending little sequence. Okay. So I go C, E flat, G, B flat, and then I just sort of, pardon me, and then I just sort of loop it. And that's a really, I find that to be a really useful technique for my own playing, just because a lot of things are going to be in 4/4, mm-hmm. So that pattern resets on every beat, and you can kind of just drill it ad nauseum until you start to just feel it. And then I switch it up to, again, I've made this exercise based on 1, 4, and 5. So I have C minor, and then I bump up to F minor 7, and then I bump up to G minor 7, and then back down to F minor 7. And I'll get you to just go back down to 60 there. Okay. And for the first half of this exercise, this is an 8-bar exercise. For the first half of it, I'm just going to be playing whole notes in the right hand of those 3 chords. And then the second half of the exercise, so bars 5 through 8, I'm going to be playing broken quarter notes going down. So here's my philosophy. Actually, you know what? Let me play it, and then I'll show you the philosophy there.
Cool.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, pardon me. That's 8 notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3, 4. So the idea behind that is obviously to keep that left hand as steady as possible. It almost becomes your metronome, really.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a few just basic physical kind of cues I look out for when I'm trying to make something as rhythmic as possible. Again, making sure that you, like your pinky note kind of anchors every beat in this phrase. It's like a 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. So, I think of it as one consistent motion, but it's always anchored by your pinky. So this is something that you don't even need to be at a piano to practice. You can be at your desk or at your driving wheel or whatever. You know, the nice thing about hand independence exercises is, of course, we're applying it to the piano, but really all we're doing on like a fundamental level is just kind of separating. It's like what you said before the lesson. We're doing that kind of pat your head and rub your stomach thing. We're sort of trying to do that, and you can just kind of work on that stuff, just throughout the day.
For sure.
Just practice your different kind of motions. One thing that I like to do in something like this is keep your left hand, again, just working in this kind of chord shape, and have your right hand play just like the minor scale or something to give it a bit of a melodic contrast. Then F. Yeah, so techniques like that are something that I use all the time. And yeah, those are the two exercises.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any questions or if there's anything there.
I'll definitely check for questions. There's a couple thoughts that I had of things that we could talk about. So we'll see first if there's any questions here.
Sure.
Okay, I think there might be, before we get into that.
Okay.
What I was thinking about was like building an effective practice schedule. Because obviously adding exercises like this, and like you said, we call it finger independence in guitar because we're only using one hand and it's not fingers, but you guys call it hand independence. How much should you practice that if you're setting up a practice schedule? And what kind of do you go about when setting up a practice schedule?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always try to keep my practice schedule evenly balanced between stuff that is technically challenging and demanding, but also inspiring. So hand independence is a sticking point for so many players, myself included. So a lot of times I like to actually just set a block aside strictly for hand independence.
Okay.
That works for me just because I hate doing it. So once I get started, it's like, hey, I'll power through. But maybe someone at home finds it easier to just kind of sprinkle it into a practice session, throughout the week or whatever.
Right.
But pardon me. When I do practice this kind of hand independence, I start off with simpler, more just technical theory stuff. Like earlier in this lesson when I was just doing that contrary motion scale. Like that's kind of the oldest trick in the book, but it's also one of the most effective. Because your fingers are crossing over at different points, and it really makes, you'll know right away if you've been kind of slacking on keeping your fingering up.
Right.
So I would start off drilling, say, 5 scales. I would go through the circle of fifths, and I would take 5 scales, and I would do that contrary motion pattern for all 5 of them. So I would start on C. to G. And then we go to D. And so on.
Right.
So I would do that. And then once you get that kind of out of the way, then I would start applying some of these exercises that I've talked about here. Mm-hmm. And that could be literally taking these exercises, or what I like to do is sort of take the concepts here and just like improvise on something.
Right.
So it might be as simple as, oh, okay, I want to work on this sort of 16th note motoring kind of thing. So I'm going to pick like 3 chords to use to sort of move between, because the movements between those chords is really important too. Mm-hmm. So I might pick, let's say I pick A major. I'm going to pick A7. And then I'm going to move up to, like, it could be anything. A major to B flat. And then let's go to G flat minor 7. So A7 to B flat, major 7 to G flat minor 7. And then just literally just do what I just did in the exercise. I'll move down here. Take your right hand and just play broken tones of those chords. So. Then repeat. And then, as with anything, you could take those chord shapes. I was just playing that all in root position, but you can always mess around with inversions. So here I'm going to, instead of playing my B flat major 7 like that, I'm just going to move everything down 1 position. So I'm going to have my A, B flat, D, and F. So I'm going to go like, here's my A7, then my B flat major 7. Maybe I go back down to this. So it's the kind of thing where it's like practicing your techniques is really important, but then also learning, like, there's so many different ways to practice your techniques, and there's so many different, you can practice your chords one way, and then you can do that same exercise, but shift it up with different inversions and practice it that way. Or you can play with different rhythms. I was playing 16th notes here, but maybe you just want to slow it down with 8th notes and play the 16th notes in the right hand. Anything that you do intentionally, like with intention, I guess might be a better way to say that, to me constitutes practice. Right. Because if you do something with intention, then you know when you did it wrong, right? Like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. And I meant to do it this way. Mm-hmm. Let's try it again, But having said that, sometimes when you make a mistake and that comes up with a cool new idea or something, and then
for sure,
yeah. So, practice is always tough to do and to stick to that regimen. But practicing in such a way where you feel like you're still making music, and you feel like you're still working on stuff that is directly applied to just the way music is written and the way chords move together, I think is a really handy way to just to practice in general. So.
I completely agree. And one other point I wanted to add. Now this, I'm not sure even if you know this, but one of the things that we've applied a lot in guitar, and there's a specific name for it, but the idea is breaking your practice time up into basically like divided chunks. So instead of maybe spending 3 hours on a Saturday, you split that into 30 minutes every day, and even better than that is 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening. And the more you do that and you separate out that time, that focus practice time actually leads to you building that muscle memory that much faster.
Yeah.
And I know when I was learning my instrument and stuff like that, I just locked myself in my room for hours and hours, and actually not all of that time was productive. at making me better, right? It was fun to noodle, and I enjoyed my instrument, and that's helpful too.
Yeah.
But focusing down your practice time, especially maybe if you work full time or you're in school or something like that, be intentional about that practice time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. You also, the other thing about splitting things up like that is you need time to gestate. I think that's gestate.
Yeah.
Gestate those concepts, right?
Absolutely.
It's just like with anything. If you keep banging your head against the wall, most of the time the wall is going to win, right?
Most of the time, I'd say, yeah.
So, you challenge yourself, make your mistakes, learn from them, and then take some time away, and then try it again later on in the day or the following morning or whatever, and you'll likely be further along than you think if you just kind of sleep on it.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, it doesn't look like we do have any questions today. So I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to talk about?
That was basically it. The things that I want also that I'll mention just finally here is, especially when you are playing something that's kind of song-like, don't be afraid to be expressive also when you're practicing. Like, for instance, in that 16th note exercise, you can just practice it as a straight, pushing buttons in the right order kind of thing, or you can kind of do some like crescendos and do some dynamics and stuff, and kind of move that way. Oh, before I forget, just because I know we've had some questions about this, and I keep forgetting to bring it up in a stream here, and this is a perfect example. Using the sustain pedal for a practice like this. Sort of what am I doing when I'm especially when you have such a busy left hand pattern. I don't know if you can see, but basically what I'm doing is I'm resetting my pedal motion after every B flat or top note on the chord. So that's just a general technique that I use. One day soon we're going to do a lesson just strictly on using the sustain pedal properly and creatively, because it's a huge asset for piano players. Yeah. But the general rule is to avoid things getting muddy is once you finish your pattern or line, reset your pedal.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So, yeah. But that's all I got for these two exercises here.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. And again, you can download the PDFs for those.
Yeah, you download the PDFs. And you know what? If you want to even post in the forums or something, especially this 16th note exercise, I really I find it really inspiring to just play around on. So if anyone ends up finding themselves just improvising or something, or turns into a song or whatever, let me know and send it in to me, and we'll do something with it or something.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe you want to play us out then?
Yeah, I'll just do a little noodling myself on this final exercise here.
Cool. See you guys later.
All right, thanks, y'all.